They thought they had banished us forever. But now, finally, we have returned.
Hello to Writer's Showcase number 57. We've been doing these for a while, folks. Anyway, I don't want to keep my lovely guests any longer. So far, we only have one watching. Yeah, Aviana pre-hype. Hey, always a pleasure, Becca. But first, we must bring in the Bard.
Here's to the Bard and I'm calling me plum. Here's to the beast and the rest of you scum. The cage is locked in and the town is aflame, and it's ours for the taking, though you get the fame.
Hey, how's it going, Dark? No. Apparently he has died. Oh dear. She's gonna murder me. Apparently the Bard is dead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry.
That was bizarre. Anyways, what I was trying to say was that the reason why we only have one viewer is because it didn't ping on Discord.
Oh, that too. Yeah, 1 second. Well, the bot's dead. Well, the bot's ability to do it is dead. So, let's let me grab the thing. Anyway, I forgot. I don't know. Tarek was unmuted. But anyway, let's bring in the others. First off.
Yo, what's up, everyone? How's it going?
Hello, Wysa.
Hey.
Hey.
Now you see why I chose that intro.
Yep. It is so iconic.
Yup, and it wakes me up and gives me the good feels before we get started.
Yep. And we have our wonderful, always curmudgeonly Balerion man. Welcome aboard, Balerion.
Interesting the way the music there refers to the theme music. But anyway, nice try at killing Tarek, Bright Lord. Maybe better luck next time.
Why would I do that? He's one of the better commentators on this channel, and he's the only person who's probably going to be on to review the sequels out of the team. Because Jeff and Wolf are pansies.
Because they're evil.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Tarek is... I think one of us mentioned this in a server at some point, that Tarek is like... He's like the rags to your Mauler, is what somebody described it as.
a title I take great pride in, to be quite frank.
Okay, explain the reference. I know Mauler and EFAP.
Yeah,
Rags is on there, but I don't need. But Rags, I don't know anything about Rags apart from that.
Rags is a YouTuber who streams with Mauler. He's kind of right. He's fairly right wing, or at least he makes right wing jokes. Because
the thing about Rags is that he's very blunt. Like, if he has something to say, he'll say it, and damn the consequences. That's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, Tarek never refers to politics at all that I know of. Maybe once in human, and he's one of the ones who don't bother people about politics around here, which I like.
Yeah. I try to avoid politics as well. It's really annoying. But I think there's somebody who's coming on who doesn't seem to really give a rat's ass.
but but at least it's higher level politics with him.
Mhm.
Yep, indeed. We must bring on our guest commissar. Please welcome.
Fataco!
Did someone say politics?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at
Yeah.
least yours aren't partisan, though. They're like on a higher level. You probably damn all sides of a lot of these debates.
Speaking of which, when are you gonna get us to review another remarkable Republican video so I can breathe communist fire over him?
Oh, you missed the one we did with Star Wars, didn't you?
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
fun.
it caught me on a bad day. That one, I couldn't have made that even if I wanted to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I loved that video. It was hilarious.
Oh, yeah, that was a riot. That was a riot.
Yeah, did you get to see it at least like later where apparently what Qui-Gon is the Donald Trump of the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, I was there for the
Oh
whole thing.
no! No!
Yeah.
That's, no!
God
Not even
help
remotely
us.
close.
Yes, it was hilarious.
It
and
was.
awful.
It was a riot. We were having a riot with that.
Yeah, I think I very rarely had experienced such joy, but also such remarkable, strange pain.
It's almost like Remarkable's in the name or something.
Who'd have thunk?
Yeah,
Yes.
So anyway, Carl Shop, I'm glad you weren't annoyed at my flash fic.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah, it's like a Bizarro universe version of Shen. I'm almost picturing her with a goatee.
Oh no! Oh no! That would be pretty awful.
Evil Shenna.
Yeah.
Oh god.
I guess maybe we could do his Joker video. I would love to do Remarkable Republican's Joker video.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Put that on
boy.
the docket.
Yeah, that
I
is
mean, I'm gonna have
probably-
to. If I ever end up getting invited to any of that, to either the Joker video or the sequel video, I'm probably gonna have to rewatch it. I mean, I won't mind with the Joker video, but the sequel's video. Oh, holy god!
Well, if you want to come on, just let me know. It pretty much like if it's first come first served. If somebody wants to commentate on the sequels, I'm down. I'm down.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm definitely down for talking about the sequel trilogy for Star Wars because holy fuck, that single-handed. The only good thing that came out of that is that it single-handedly inspired me to get onto writing, like making that into a hobby and a passion, because of how poorly it was handled.
It's
Yeah,
also single-handedly launched many people's careers.
Yep.
There's on
Good job,
YouTube.
Ryan. You laid down the template for what not to do.
I think he's brilliant.
You
Yeah,
haven't even
I think-
seen his crap. Not even his crappy murder mystery Knives Out.
No, he's brilliant. I'm just
Secretly
trolling.
genius.
I'm just
Yeah.
trolling you. I've never actually
Yeah.
seen them. I'm just trolling you.
Well, that would be. Well, I do think that you would. Well, it's interesting and not really good, but we'll see. We'll see when we get to that. We're watching Rogue One and Solo right now. We'll do that next. Solo is going to be next Tuesday in the evening.
Not too late though. I hope.
Oh no! Don't worry. Yeah, Knives Out is bad. People who say it's good, it's just like it's kind of fun, but you have to turn your brain off.
I don't even understand what was so fun about it. I was sitting there in the theater, and it was like I was the only one who wasn't laughing. I was like looking at the theater around me. I'm like, you guys are so easily entertained. I envy you. that you find this shit
Oh.
half as funny as you think it does. And whenever they started talking about politics, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. It's made by this guy." I was just ripped right out of the movie.
Yeah.
You know what movie I saw the other day, like literally yesterday, that wasn't terrible?
What?
Jungle Cruise. It actually wasn't awful.
Oh yeah, we were
Yeah.
talking about that in Mahler's Discord server. I still think that I still find it unbelievable that the Kaiser's son is being
Yeah, Kaiser
sent,
Wilhelm's son.
is being sent to find this random ass shit in the middle of the Amazon jungle that probably doesn't even exist, rather than I don't know, staying back home in Germany fighting for the Empire and leading the men into
Or even-
battle.
Or
I-
even
I'm-
helping administration or something.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised they ripped off the plot to Anaconda Blood Orchard for this movie.
Oh, that's funny. Well, does anybody have any time constraints that they need to address before we get started?
No.
I'm good.
Okay. Alrighty. We'll just go down the line.
Sorry, I'm answering your question.
Oh, okay.
As usual, I have to go a little after 4 p.m. I'm still around, but I have to go AFK-ish around 4 p.m. or a little after.
Okay.
Okay, you can go first then.
Okay. Actually, have a moment, though. I need to get some water. Sorry.
Okay.
The only thing I didn't buy in Jungle Cruise that Dwayne the Rock Johnson was playing a Spaniard.
What?
He's so clearly not a Spaniard. It is hilarious.
No, but the weirdest part was that somehow he lost his accent. That I didn't understand.
He lost his accent. Okay.
Oh, speaking of Spaniard, I was actually watching Gladiator with my dad the other day.
Huh.
Great ass movie, by the way. I just have one complaint, and that is, why didn't the Emperor have his Praetorians with him when he went to address his son? Clearly, he must have really trusted that his son would respect the traditional ties of, father and son. But, yeah.
Well,
That's
he
getting
was.
into spoilers.
Well, if it's the imperial family, any imperial family in ancient Rome, then he's probably right.
Yeah.
Because that law are like the kind of like the Atrids, the quintessential dysfunctional families.
Yep.
So, half a second, I'm about ready to start. And I'm sorry I'm not doing communist rabbits because last time people were forgetting who people in my serious novel were and all that. They said it had been too long since the last one. So I'm going to do another serious one, and then next time I'll do communist rabbits. So, so to summarize, the Emperor Equeque is annoyed at Counts Pilamar and not Barama, Garawada. You see, even I'm getting confused over my names. Garawada, because they wouldn't let their kids join the Barus, which is a kind of a harem thing. So they've been arrested on the pretext that they harbored an SJW woke lawyer who's very out of fashion, whose name is Muku. So on the grounds of that, they've been arrested, and they're waiting to find out what happens to them afterwards because they've been convicted of treason. So hopefully that's reasonably clear. So one day or night, it was admittedly hard to tell. The jailer announced a visitor, none other than Blessed Malala Amma in person, clad somberly in black, as was the custom when visiting those condemned to die, and carrying a candle in one hand and a bag in the other. Suhun Yaja Mishtaka Chanji, said the priest, the Yaji. Would great ones be pleased to accept bread and water? I was not allowed to bring anything better, but at least they are of good quality. Anjamu Angara, said the prisoners. Blessed graces us abundantly. Malala Ama opened the bag and handed them each a slice of bread and a water skin. But we do wonder, added Garawada, why Blessed has graced us in this manner after joining in a death sentence. The Holy Book says, Humat, Humat, Karat Maki Karat, which means justice is justice, but mercy is mercy, replied Malala Ama. I could not withstand exalted will when you yourselves made no effort to prove your innocence. Yet I still hope to sway exalted ear to mercy, should you throw yourselves upon said mercy. I'm still not clear on exactly what our crime is supposed to be, said Pilamar. Speeding an emissary of Holy One the Grand Yaji upon his way? Speeding one under exalted displeasure upon his way, said the Yaji. Aiding exalted enemies. This constitutes treason, and the Holy Book makes it clear that treason is a terrible crime. Zudrai li granra. The traitor is accursed. And yet, if you were to throw yourselves upon exalted mercy, and to carry out an act showing true contrition, exalted may yet be moved to compassion. Pardon me 1 second. This act being, for example, asked Garawada, hand Margaret and Barama over to the Barusa, said the Yaji. This would prove your love and loyalty to exalted Box, and wash away your guilt. Wash away? Said Garawada. It would stain us forever. How can Blessed justify that? No. No, repeated Pilamar. May Izaharum enlighten Blessed. I'm afraid I must refuse this mercy. I grieve, said Malala Ama, bowing his head. May Nyaja, Ishtaka, and Angara have compassion upon your souls. And upon Blessed's, replied Pilamar. Garawada said nothing, but snorted disdainfully. The Yaji bowed his head mournfully and uttered a brief prayer that sacred Nai might enlighten the prisoners' souls with wisdom. Then he left, taking the candle with him, and plunging the two prisoners again in darkness. Shortly thereafter, the judges met with the emperor in the vestibule to the imperial chamber in order to discuss what was to be done with refractory counts. Exalted was in a foul mood, as the ruby wall hanging glorifying the imperial dynasty hadn't even been started, and he had not been mollified by a proposal to use fake rubies instead. The emperor lolled about upon the imperial couch, whilst the judges prostrated themselves upon the floor. Mpu'u looked bored, Malala Ama grieved, and Gara, that is the prime minister, sycophantic. Actually, not the prime minister, I'm sorry, the minister of justice, sycophantic. The grey minister, the minister of police, to his annoyance, hadn't been invited. Why did the purple minister get to have all the fun? How shall they die? Asked Garan, lifting his head. What punishment is merited by their treason? Bearing in mind that it's relatively mild as treasons go, put in Mpu'u. He wished they could get it over with. This floor was beastly. The station was beastly. The room was beastly. The pornographic art was beastly. The whole boiling was beastly. Torture! Said the emperor, sputtering. Slow, painful death! Have them eaten to death by rats! He laughed maniacally. If it please Exalted, said Malala Ama, it will be a praiseworthy act of mercy to grant them a quick death. This would become their rank and redound to the credit of Exalted name. He was probably more or less sincere. Being a hypocrite doesn't necessarily make one a sadist. cruelty was gross and indecorous. Blessed's right, exalted father, said Mpu'u. Torturing nobles to death is bad form in general. And what will you do if someone does something that really merits being tortured to death? Like plotting regicide. Super torture them? Oh, very well, said Ekwekwe. At least we'll be done with them and can move on to getting their offspring. But I want their corpses fed to the rats. I exalted. I want to couple with the rats. And see to that ruby wall hanging. Mpu'u rolled his eyes while Malala Ama looked grave. Ghana, still the minister, still looked sycophantic. So, beheading with the sword of mercy then? Said the purple minister blandly. Pardon me. Exalted allows this, said the emperor. Now that's enough of business of state. Exalted, I've been away from the Barusa for a whole 8 minutes. That amounts to 10 minutes and 48 seconds in our time, so I dare say Exalted had a point. So they all made their exits. Ekwekwe heading for the Barusa and Sarangi's numbers 428 to 432, and the other three probably heading for their Sarangis as well. Mpu'u and Malala Ama stopped briefly in the hallway. Mpu'u still rolling his eyes and the Yaji adopting the usual sorrowful yet resigned expression, which he doubtless cast off as soon as he reached the Sarangis. Let's see. It's only been about 10 minutes. Okay, I think I can finish this chapter. Let's see what happens. The 27th day of Yuparyaura on the 2130th year of the truth, that is 1st October 1412, being the day appointed for the execution, dawned more or less like any other for Garawada and Pilamar, which is to say that it didn't dawn at all. The jailer gave them one more breakfast, not a very good one, but no worse than countless others. Pardon me. And guards untied them and silently beckoned them to follow. They were taken first to a kind of fountain up on the ground floor of the prison, which was more or less like a small waterfall coming out of a sluice. A little less than half of the fountain was gray and a little more than half was purple, which was a bit of a bone of contention between the purple ministry and the gray. Here the counts were allowed a slight cleaning up, quite insufficient to wash off the prison filth, but better than any non-noble prisoners ever got. Then they were led to the place of execution, which was not too far from where they had been, in a manner of speaking, tried. Pilamar, despite having been at risk of violent death a number of times in the barbarian years, couldn't quite suppress a shiver of dread, mainly because he feared Exalted might have him and Garawada tortured or worse. Pull yourself together, he told himself. The main problem is that Margaret is hardly ready to rule, and the estates will fall to pieces. He uttered a brief prayer to Sacred Nine that they might guide and protect her. Garawada was more angry than frightened. Avenge us, Onihandra, he prayed silently. Punish those who did this to us. Bring justice to the empire. You're walking too quickly, snapped the Grey Minister when the counts had reached him, followed a fair distance away by their guards. Have you no sense of the solemnity of the occasion? Garawada glared at him contemptuously, but Pilamar bowed and said, I beg excellent minister's pardon. One should always respect propriety when getting murdered. This is no time for bon mot, said the minister, Ara. The judgment of Sacred Nine is upon your head. He was annoyed that the executioner belonged to the Purple Ministry, and he was consequently out of sorts. Also, the waka'a drug that he'd had that morning had been rubbish. So I gather, remarked Pylamar mildly, upon all our heads, I dare say. Silence. The final ritual begins. About time, muttered Garawada. They can't even murder people decently at this court. The counts passed the rest of the final promenade through the plaza of greatness and justice, while the glorious imperial ancestors either bore witness to the justice of the punishment or didn't, until they reached the place of execution in front of the gate of justice and lay down upon the ground under the ferocious gaze of the statue of Ikri, punishing the, presumably, wicked. If only Ikri really would punish the wicked, remarked Garawada to himself. Far above, on the pyramid of benches just below their imperial uncles and aunts, sat Mpu'u's sons Mbawa and Pako'e. Above the imperial families sat the priest Malala the prince Mpu'u, the purple minister or minister of justice, Gara Bemerama, and above them sat the squealing emperor. There was no need for all this pomp. It's a waste of resources, glorious Uncle Juarama was saying. And the penal system in the empire badly wants reforming. Silence, you filthy traitor, said glorious Aunt Uyeja. Your subversive views are hateful to all loyal scions of the dynasty. I answered that argument in my essay on true and false loyalty, said Uncle Juarama, and went off on a lengthy political tangent, interrupted frequently by Aunt Uyeja's cries of outrage. I've always wanted to ask Uncle Juarama about his views, said Mbawa. I never seem to get a word along with him. If only I could get a hold of one of his essays somehow. Maybe in the library? But I bet they're banned. And pardon all these names. At this moment, the voice of Mbawa's brother Pako'e burst in upon his reflections. Boring! Uncle Juarama just talks and talks and talks. He writes books, too. And they say he's the worst dancer in the imperial family. He's Exalted's brother, so you should treat him with respect, Mbawa sighed. A bad move, since Pako'e promptly mimicked him before babbling on. Why? Exalted can't stand him. Oh, look at that orchestra. It has flutes, drums, water drums, horns, and even... What are those instruments with strings crisscrossing each other called? Vikaras. Duh, said Mbawa. Don't you know anything? I've got better things to do than learn stuff, said Pako'e. When I'm emperor, I can do whatever I want, so why should I learn anything? Yes, your reign will be glorious, I'm sure. All 15 minutes of it. I wonder what counts Garawada and Pylamar did that was so bad. Exalted says they're traitors. This chorus is boring. What are they singing about? I think they're singing the praises of justice. Oh, irony, remarked Uncle Juarama. And it's even better that corps de ballet is dramatizing King Sauron's great acts exemplifying that virtue. Between Sauron and my exalted brother, the resemble... You will not corrupt my glorious nephews with your disloyal lies, interrupted Aunt Uyeja. Come, glorious nephews. See the garlands strewn between the pillars in the plaza of greatness. Aren't they lovely? And the torches placed in front of the statues of our exalted ancestors are splendid. Yes, glorious aunt, said Pako'e. Don't worry, this chapter's almost over. What are the Coens laughing at? Asked Mbawa. Oh, it's just a pack of shining rats that somehow got in and are wandering around sniffing people and squealing, said Mpu'u. Prince Mpu'u. The commons are easily amused. The commons are stupid, glorious father, said Pako'e. Never mind, replied Mpu'u. Just be quiet and watch and listen, both of you. You might, heaven forfend, learn something. Let's see. Learn something. Okay, there's only about a couple of more pages. Should I go on or should I stop? Am I over time yet?
I don't think.
No, you're good. Go for it.
Okay, here we go. Mbawa was silent and looked distractedly at the nobles seated below. The entire upper nobility and a selection of the lower nobility resident in the city of Tina had been rounded up, some more willingly than others. The commons had been only too willing to attend. No rounding up had been required as far as they were concerned. It seemed to Prince Mbawa that the bystanders were divided, roughly, into the gleeful, the sullen, and the bored. It was difficult to gauge the number of the sullen, since they kept their feelings to themselves. The gleeful were certainly the most vocal contingent, if not necessarily the most numerous, who were probably the bored. No one seems to care that these lords are getting killed, observed Mbawa. A full complement of clergy were on hand to lend gravity to the occasion, and most of them didn't seem very interested as well. Yeah, I need to get rid of all those words. Okay. Prince Mpu'u and Yaji Malala Ama and Purple Minister Gara, seated in places of honor just beneath the emperor, did their best to maintain an atmosphere of solemnity. The emperor made no such effort. His squeals of infantile laughter resounded throughout the plaza of greatness. I wish exalted grandfather would listen to Uncle Ju'arama and pursue the good of all, murmured Mbawa half to himself. Look, whispered Pako'e oblivious. Those traitor provincials are tied up, with only space for their necks. Won't it be fun when they're killed? That's so the rope won't have to be cut. Mbawa whispered back, restraining his annoyance at having to listen to his stupid brother. Silence, said Mpu'u. The counts, of course, heard none of this, and perhaps had other things to think about anyway, for they were now doing their best to prepare for death and judgment. They murmured some last-minute prayers as they waited for the final stroke to fall. It would not be long now. The executioner, already stood beside them, dressed entirely in black and wearing a black mask that covered his face. He had unsheathed the sword of mercy and rested it with the blade facing down, as he waited motionless for the word of command. A loud drum sounded, alerting those present that the event was about to begin. The songs and prayers and music were silenced. The gossip of the nobles and commons alike was stilled. The purple minister spoke gravely. Count Garawada of Peje and Count Hilamar of Ichalamu stand condemned of treason, he said. The penalty for this is death. The great kings of Terrania, Odira and Saran Amajara, and the great ancestors of Exalted's illustrious house, Deloe and Oea and Pako'e, renowned for their justice of their judgments, showing neither bias nor favor. Do we likewise, and punish these malefactors according to their desert, neither with laxity nor with undue harshness. Malala Ama then spoke, adopting, needless to say, a grieved tone, as though mourning the necessity of this exhibition. He dwelt in his sermon upon the evils of treason and the virtue of clemency, whereof Ekwekwe IV cast all his ancestors into the shade, and he concluded with a peroration addressed directly to Pilamar and Garawada. Repent, he urged. Throw yourselves upon the mercy of the exalted, and receive abundant blessings in this life and the next. Let's throw mud balls at them again, yelled the emperor, somewhat undercutting the Yaji's message. Let exalted us! And he did, along with those members of the gleeful contingent who hadn't got tired of it yet and were hopeless sycophants. Exalted? Is this dignified? Said the Yaji. Should we not observe a certain solemnity at this regrettable... Boring, said Equeque. It's time for some sport. So the mudballs and the insults resumed until even the gleeful had begun to lose momentum. Malala spoke again, trying to pretend this interruption hadn't happened. He hated departing from proper protocol. Do great ones have any last words before Exalted's justice falls upon them? Yes, said Garawada. We are being put to death not for the crime whereof we are accused, but for that of not sending Margaret. No, dry up, said the Emperor, unaware that a Trogon had begun swirling menacingly. Trogon, a kind of bird, had begun swirling menacingly around his head again. The commons tittered and began to lay bets as to when Exalted would notice. It is traditional to allow the criminal his last words, said the Yaji uncomfortably. Is it truly a crime to aid the Grand Yad? Began Pilamar. No! Exalted, I said dry up, said Equeque. I Exalted end that tradition. Kill them! Kill them dead now! Imperial command! The executioner obeyed, beheading them both in a single stroke. Pilamar's head wearing an expression of mild remonstrance, and Garawada's one of irritation. The Emperor ordered the heads placed on spikes on either side of the gate, and commanded that for the next week mudballs be thrown at them after the imperial supper. He found this highly amusing, but for most, the sport had palled. Even the commons thought it high time for a change of scene. Luckily, a mountebank had arrived in town with a pair of fighting Kanwari birds that promised to be highly entertaining. And that's end of part 1. So that's also the end of my reading.
They killed the guys. No fair.
Yep, sorry about that.
I hope you got
Okay.
something planned for this Emperor guy. He needs to be deposed immediately.
Well, something will happen eventually.
I mean, yeah, I think this is more or less just the setup to how terrible this guy is and why the protagonist will have to overthrow him at some point.
Well, he's certainly terrible. No argument.
Yeah.
Actually, no, he's brilliant. He's the hero of the story.
Yeah, he's the hero, just like Joffrey is the untimely tragic hero of A Song of Ice and Fire.
Well, yeah, of course, of course.
Mhm.
So I hope the names weren't too annoying.
They weren't. The names weren't anything that I took issue with.
The only thing that I have is just like I don't really know what many of these people look like.
You know,
That's kind of the only thing.
you know, if anything, I kind of want to just write out a portion or some sort of book or something where I just name things based off of whether or not it sounds fun to say, or whether or not it sounds like it would fit with the thing that I gave the name to. So yeah.
Yeah. Most of my names have some meaning or have some cultural significance. Not all, but some of them, and I always try to make them sound nice as well. And yeah, when I go back and rewrite, I'm going to put more things about little things about how people look like. I'm not going to go into detail, but I'll go into a little more about what people look like. But this is still like I'm still getting feedback kind of thing. So I'll go back and rewrite. But first, I want to go and I want to finish this line of editing, and I want to. There's like several chapters at the end that I just outlined, and I want to write them too. So I want to get around to doing that, and then when I go back over it, I'll put more things in, like what people look like and stuff. Not too much, but a little bit.
All right.
Smart.
Yeah, I think Becca has some advice on making names, and I kind of agree with her on that.
No, because I make my names all have a meaning. So you see, and that's based on the culture. So I can't just. They have to be, because I've got the culture and the languages and stuff all set up. So the names have to fit that. Margaret is actually a real name, but that's an accident because it comes from a game I was playing with my sister when I was younger. So that's a real name is almost an accident.
All right, understandable.
So I can't. I'm not going to name people Richard and English names because they wouldn't have English names. They'd never heard of England or of Europe, so they wouldn't have any English names.
Okay.
So,
Right.
so I'm very big on the world building aspect.
I like it.
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who's next?
Well, I may have to be
see.
going soon. Yeah. I'm actually gonna have to
You
get
wanna go
going
next?
soon.
Okay, if you need to go next, go for it.
All right. Let's see. I should say about 12 minutes. Yeah, about 12 minutes to get through this. All right. So this is actually going to be the first time I need to provide context for stuff that I haven't yet presented because I added in a chapter a while back to slow down the pacing of the story. Basically, the chapter with there was a dream sequence in there that was an incident that took place during Rosa and Maria's childhood, and yeah, basically some chick was bullying them in the past, and Maria had to teach Rosa not to be wrathful, essentially. So yeah, that's all the context you need, and I'm gonna go and get started on to God damn it, I have to actually leave at 1. Done. Can you present this one, or is that just not gonna be a possibility this time around?
If you want to just hold the spot for next week, I think that would be fine. And since you weren't able to present this week, is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. We should let you go first then. You should have
Yeah.
gone first and me afterwards. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
It's because 1 o'clock at my time is Friday prayer. So yeah.
Oh.
Can you
Oh,
come back later after the Friday prayer and get it turned on?
No, it ends at around 2 o'clock ish. So yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. It's my fault for not mentioning before we began. Thanks for having me on anyway. I'll go ahead and just hop off, and I guess we can
Okay.
reserve a spot for next week. See ya.
Gil.
Yeah.
All right. See you.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a riot.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Oh well. Sorry.
No, it's
Yeah.
fine. I asked, he didn't answer. So
No
nobody
worries.
could have
These
known.
things happen from time to time.
Yeah, he just kind of forgot.
He was being too modest.
Yeah.
All right. So who's up now?
I guess you.
let's-
Anyone?
Carl can go next.
I was gonna say
Alright.
let Carl go first. Yeah.
Okay. So this is this is chapter 8.
Get hype. Shenna hype.
Oh yeah. Yep. So yeah. This is chapter 8, the first lesson. The soft light filtering through the thin curtains gently roused Shenna from the best night's sleep she had ever experienced. She never slept in an actual bed before, to say nothing of a fine goose feather bed like this one. Shenna rolled over and hugged her soft pillow, wishing she could stay here, wrapped in soft safety forever. The feeling of tiny talons pricking at her through her covers finally convinced Shenna to sit up in her bed. Her little crow took to its wings for a moment and set itself back down on Shenna's lap as soon as the covers were calm once again. It held a songberry in its little beak. Shenna smiled as she took the succulent purple jewel, Not one day since arriving in Acre, and already her little companion had learned where to find songberries. It was good to know that they were both settling in nicely. Shenna slid out of her bed and walked over to her clothes trunk. She threw on one of her robes over her shift and slipped her feet into her new moccasins and walked over to the curtains to let in more light. Shenna wasn't particularly comfortable telling time by hours yet, but judging by the angle of the shadows and the dew scattered across the rooftops, the morning was young. It looked like a beautiful day was coming soon. The perfect start to a brand new life. The crow glided to a perch on the windowsill beside Shenna as she gazed down on the canal walkways, watching the scattered people going to and fro on early morning errands. After a moment, the crow spread its wings and glided out across the canal and suddenly swooped down upon a man wearing an expensive-looking hat with a large feather set in its brim. Shenna watched as her bird touched down, ripped the feather out of its hat, and flew away before the man could catch a glimpse of his attacker. By the time he noticed that the feather was missing, the crow had already rejoined Shenna atop the windowsill. Shenna delicately took the feather from the creature's beak. "For me?" she said sweetly, tucking the large plume up beside her ear. Yes, a large, dignified plume was just the thing to complete her appearance. Now, if only she had a hat of her own. All at once, the crow leapt up onto her shoulder, took the feather back, and hopped down back onto the windowsill. Shenna stared at the bird, wondering why it had retracted its gift so suddenly. She made a half-hearted attempt to reclaim the feather, but the crow foiled each one. And then a thought occurred to her. "You don't like people wearing feathers, do you?" The crow stood defiant, refusing to be parted from the feather. That made sense. That feather had belonged to a bird once. A bird that had probably been killed for its plumage. That wasn't fair at all. Shenna tousled its head fondly. "Don't worry, I understand. I have plenty of clothes for myself now." The bird turned about and took flight again, still clutching the stolen feather in its beak, though Shenna was no longer certain who had truly stolen it, the bird or the man who had worn it. Shenna slipped out of her chamber without waking Elira, and made her way down the stairwell to the refectory on the first floor. There, Shenna claimed for herself a bowl of thick, savory porridge and a steaming piece of fresh flatbread to scoop it out with. She took a seat at one of the long benches, and, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she ate her fill. As more and more white-robed students came in and went through the refectory, Shenna noticed them stealing glances up at the large, imposing clock set into the north wall. Shenna remembered Magistress Karna telling her that her first class was at 7 of the morning, but without knowing how to read a clock, she had no way of telling how much time she had left. She tried asking a few other students how long it was until 7, but they would only grunt and point up at the clock. And that when they didn't simply ignore her outright. Hardly a helpful bunch, these students. Finally, deciding not to take any more risks on this all-important first day of classes, Shenna got up and made her way across the grounds to the southwestern house of study. Her path took her past the library, where a number of non-magisterium people already milled about outside the door. She also passed by the southeastern house of study and wondered for a moment why they couldn't think of a more distinct name for the buildings in order to distinguish them from their twins. When Shenna arrived at the southwestern hall, she found its great iron-bound door shut tight. After a few futile attempts at opening the door, she wandered around the side of the building, looking for another way in. It was no use. There weren't even any windows to peer through and possibly get someone's attention, nor was there anyone else outside to ask. Was she too late? A flurry of horrible thoughts whirled through Shenna's mind. Maybe she'd missed the start of class and they'd locked the door. Or maybe the entire class had been moved somewhere else and nobody had told her. Maybe someone on the staff was trying to sabotage Shenna's experience in order to slight Magistress Karna. Maybe they would kick her out of the magisterium and send her back to... "What are you doing out here?" The sudden question cut through Shenna's panicked thoughts. and she whirled about to see a large man with a thick white beard and a flushed red face that looked as though it was trying to swallow up his tired gray eyes. His black magister's robes fitted him poorly, too loose about the upper torso and too tight about the waist. Shenna stammered as she tried to gather her thoughts. I was supposed to be here for a class at 7 in the morning with Magister Parnulf, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do or where I'm supposed to...
Ah, yes, I remember you,
the man said with a thick, chesty cough.
The new girl, Karna's little peasant protege. Shendra, was it?
Shenna recognized the voice from the other day in the Hall of Ceremonies. A tired old condescending wheeze that never used only one word where 3 would get the job done. Magister Parnulf's appearance matched his voice perfectly. I am Shenna, honored Magister, Shenna said with a deep bow.
Yes, yes.
Magister Parnulf waddled clumsily around Shenna to reach the door, which he opened with the key.
It's good that you've arrived early. I was given a number of crucial items to pass along to you by the administration staff. Follow after me now.
Shenna followed Magister Parnulf through the doorway and into the corridor beyond. The same red flames burned heatlessly from wall sconces as in the other buildings on the magisterium grounds.
I trust you appreciate the unique circumstances in which you have found yourself, Shayla. We don't usually admit new students during the 4th week of our seasonal course schedule, but as Magistress Karna has declared a special use for you, an exception has been made. Great things are to be expected of you, and we trust you shall rise to meet the said expectations.
I'll do my best, Shenna said.
See that you do,
Magister Parnulf said, turning at last into a large, well-lit chamber that seemed to slope into the ground. Rows of wooden desks stood arranged in concentric semicircles, each successive row set below the one behind it, all facing toward the center of the chamber, where a lectern and a small table stood before a large chalkboard. Magister Parnulf crossed the room straight down to the lectern and pulled out a large leather package which he set atop the table.
These are your books,
Magister Parnulf said, naming each item as he pulled it out of the package.
A comprehensive mathematical philosophy,
a thick volume with shabby yellowed pages.
Fundamental mystical theory,
a similarly large book, though much likely much newer, judging by the clean white paper bound inside it.
Your personal copybook,
a much thinner book with a pouch woven in the spine with a small pen set inside it,
and a copy of the disciplinary policies of the magisterium and the obligations pertaining to initiates.
A small scroll that might have been tucked in with the rest almost as an afterthought. Magister Parnulf clumsily slipped the books back into the leather package and handed it to Shenna, who winced when she took the package into her arms and felt its weight. Was she really going to have to lug all these books back and forth to classes every day? It hardly seemed fair. She couldn't even read them yet. At least the package came with a long strap that she could sling over her shoulder.
Now then, Magister Parnulf said, I believe the rest of the students are about to join us for today's lecture. You may take your seat now, Shana.
Which one is mine? Shenna asked, looking out across the rows of desks.
Any will do,
Parnulf said. Shenna shrugged and took a seat on the far edge of the closest row, the first one she could reach. She set her books down before her, pulled out her copybook, and slipped the pen out of its sleeve. Also, where do we get the ink?
Ink?
Magister Parnulf huffed.
I feel I should advise you that I have little patience for practical jests or students who consider themselves comical.
Shenna blinked. Had she said something wrong?
If you have need to recharge your pen, you may see the administration offices in between lectures, Magister Parnulf said. Initiates will not have access to ink until examinations.
Shenna looked down at her pen. Sure enough, there was a small crystal flickering with magical light between the tip and the wooden holder. Shenna gaped. Even pens were magical here. Well, of course they are, Shenna thought, shaking her head to clear the foolish amazement from her eyes. Everything was magical here. A sound at the top of the chamber drew her attention, and Shenna noticed a slew of young students filing into the hall. Very young students. Some possibly as young as 6 years old. And more of the young people were filtering in. The air began to thicken with idle conversation, and Shenna's age began to seem like more and more of an oddity. She sank lower and lower into her chair, trying to draw as little attention to herself as possible. By the time the chamber was full, only one other student even remotely near to her age had arrived. A short boy with black hair, black eyes, and an angular face that seemed to be made for scowls and frowns. He took a seat on the opposite side of the room, leaving her isolated.
Now then, students, let us begin today's exercise,
Magister Parnulf announced from the center of the chamber, the haze of conversation going abruptly silent as he began.
Open your copybooks to page 10 and copy the third line.
Shenna opened her book, counted out 10 pages, and found the third line. She picked up her pen and... No, that couldn't be the right way to hold it. Clutching the pen in a heavy fist probably wouldn't give her the necessary precision for writing. Besides, she dimly remembered Estrin the Scrivener from back in Riverwatch. Every time she'd seen him working, he'd always held his pen in a very specific way, lightly between his fingers. How had he done that again? Shenna glanced at the young student sitting beside her, carefully scrutinizing and then imitating the way he held his pen. Once she was satisfied that she was holding her own pen correctly, Shenna returned her focus to the copybook and... Which side did you start writing from? Shenna considered for a moment. Well, she was holding her pen in her right hand, so if she started on the right side of the page, she would probably risk smudging her words after she wrote them, so from the left side it was. And so, taking a deep breath to bring her mind to order, Shenna lowered the tip of her pen to the page and made the first stroke. A shimmering black trail followed after her pen, tracing out the shape of the first symbol. Shenna paused only for a moment to make sure that she had imitated the form correctly before moving on to the next one. As the text began to take shape, Shenna wondered what exactly it meant. What did each symbol mean? Did they represent words? Sounds? Parts of sounds? Did one symbol affect the ones next to it? What could this secret code possibly contain? What a mystery this was. She couldn't wait to learn. As the last symbol took shape on the page, Shenna looked up and noticed Magister Parnulf walking through the chamber, inspecting the student's copybooks. Shenna looked over the line one last time, and, satisfied with her work, she proudly awaited Magister Parnulf's appraisal.
Wrong,
Magister Parnulf said tersely after a quick glance at Shenna's copybook. In an instant, all of Shenna's pride and wonder vanished, like a soap bubble popping in air. What is it? What did I do wrong?
That is page 18,
Magister Parnulf said, already rounding the corner to inspect the row behind Shenna.
I instructed you to copy the third line on page 10.
Shenna tried to protest further, but Magister Parnulf had already moved on to the next student. Page 18. Shenna counted up the pages again to make sure. Yes, this was the 10th one. Maybe the different sides of the pages counted as a single page? But then shouldn't that put her on page 20 instead? What was she missing about this? She leaned over to check the student next to her, but he had already closed his copybook. Shenna waited as Magister Parnulf completed his inspection of the rest of the students. He passed by Shenna as he made his way back down to the center of the chamber, and she tried to catch his attention again. Honored Magister, I'm not sure which page you meant. Can I ask...
If you disrupt my lecture again, I shall have you ejected from the hall,
Magister Parnulf said, without even looking in her direction. The portly man wobbled to the front of the lectern and cleared his throat with a ragged cough. Now, as you have no doubt noticed during today's introductory exercise, syllable characters may be written with the addition of special marks. This modification indicates a division of the syllable into one of its constituent components, either a vowel, a consonant, or a cluster of consonants. Today we shall learn more of these modifications and familiarize ourselves with the necessary patterns concerned therein. Magister Parnolf turned to the chalkboard behind him and began drawing symbols, all the while droning on about consonants, vowels, diacritics, phonics, and a bunch of other words that Shenna had never heard before. He could have been making the entire lecture up off the top of his head, and she would never know. Shenna didn't dare speak up to ask for a clarification, though. No, she had already learned the first lesson about life in the Magisterium. Don't ask questions, don't ask for help, and whatever you do, don't ever be wrong. Lesson complete.
That's it?
Interesting.
Yep.
I gotta say, I gotta tell you, anyone
Oh,
who
yeah.
says schedule
This is,
like that,
This is a horrible, horrible experience that no child should have to go through, and far too many already have.
the first day of school.
Hang on, am I losing connection?
I can hear.
I'm
you.
not hearing anyone.
What? You're not hearing anyone?
Oh, I'm here. I'm here. I'm just waiting for Tarek.
Can he hear us?
It's okay.
Can you hear us?
What? Sailor Age Shop, can you hear us?
It's going. I don't know. Is everyone talking right now?
Yeah.
We were.
Okay, because I might be having connection issues.
Oh god, I hate those. I want them dead. But anyway, well, actually, there's not much point in our commenting if you can't hear what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll just say, like,
But,
anyone who says schedule
yeah.
that way really has a place in my heart.
So, what do people think about this one?
Well, I think that Parnoff has a highly enlightened pedagogical approach, which should be imitated by all teachers
I concur most strongly.
to the letter. I mean, come on. The whole purpose of it is to teach them to learn. So if you teach them anything, they won't learn anything, because then they're not learning because you're teaching them. So therefore, you should not teach them anything.
Children should be thrown into the woods and learn to survive on their own as soon as they can.
Yeah, self-reliance.
Self-reliance for the win. We must
No.
always teach them this.
No, what was the line from Indiana Jones 3? I taught you something more valuable than love. I taught you self-reliance.
All right.
Sean Connery is great in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was an interesting introduction to Accra pedagogical approach.
Yeah.
Are the other teachers like this too? Did they just say, hey, just copy this stuff and don't ask any questions and don't ever be wrong?
Sorry to interrupt. I'll be right back
Well,
in just a second.
Okay.
I got a couple of other ones. We're going to learn more about hear more about them in the next one. But Magister Forlek, who teaches mathematics, is fast-paced and very, very demanding and takes no excuses. And Renellith, who teaches mystical theory, basically science, just writes on the chalkboard and doesn't actually do a whole lot of instruction.
Are there any
most
actually
engineering professors?
Are
But
there
we'll
any
get to them
actual
later.
Are there any actual good teachers at the Magisterium?
I think Shenna will run into one tomorrow. Next time. I mean, the next time I'm on. I'm probably going to take next week off.
Oh,
But,
rats. I guess I can't do the communist rabbits next week then. Well, that could, but it would be kind of spoil the fun because you wouldn't be there to say that the Marxism in the story was absolute wall.
Well, funny you mentioned about communism. Do we have time to read Balerion's little flash fiction about Shenna?
Sure, I have no issue.
It's quite short.
Oh yes, yes. This was if you may remember from last time, Shenna went on a little bit of a shopping trip with Elira. So this is Shenna and Elira several years later. And see to it that palanquin bearer number 7 receives 77 lashes, concluded Shenna. He was a full miliguza below the others. I command perfection in my minions. For Shenna had been corrupted by the class system and now hated and despised her social inferiors. Elira tugged on Shenna's sleeve, eager to be shopping. Darling, isn't that rather severe? She remarked. If we allow our servitors to get away with laxity, they'll become bold and won't respect their betters. Have you thought of the consequences of that? Elira hadn't. I usually just have the major domo decide the punishment. Such things are beneath my notice, and management is so boring. And you trust the major domo? Shenna almost hissed. He's a servitor too. His class interests will drive him if you give him so much power. We must crush the lower orders underfoot, utterly. Elira was taken slightly aback. Darling, you can be so melodramatic sometimes. He wouldn't dare. Oh, wouldn't he? Give a servant an inch, and the next thing you know, he's fomenting revolution, and the lower orders rebel and create a workers' paradise. Captain will be a bore when that happens. Elira laughed, a beautiful, tinkling laugh. Darling, you should be a tragic poet. You have such an imagination. Now do cheer up. I'm going to be getting some earrings. I never spend less than 20 gold lath on jewelry. Do you? Never, agreed Shenna wholeheartedly.
The way you read that thing, the way you read it made it like 20 times funnier.
Jesus Christ.
Balerion has a comedic genius brain. I love it.
Yeah, that was just top notch.
What can I say? I couldn't have read it so well though.
Yeah.
For a moment, I thought that was you were reading from later on in the book, Carl.
So, yeah,
I
my
thought
first
that was
fan
canon.
fiction. Sweet. I'm moving up in the world. I'm a real professional now.
Yeah.
All right.
I did one on Tarek's Ivania thing too, where I had a bunch of horrible things happen to Ivania. Not Ivania.
You mean
Aviana.
Aviana?
Yeah, I'm getting confused because I had a coworker named Aviana, named Ivania.
It's literally a pun on avian.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Aviana. Yeah, Aviana. I know it's Aviana. I just got confused. Yeah, so I had one where all these horrible things were happening to her, and then Merrick told her, I don't actually like you very much. And then Fjorn appeared to her in a vision and said, well, you know what? No, forget about it. You're damned, or something like that.
Sorry. I've learned I have a rich
Speaking
uncle.
of Tarek, what have you got for us this week?
I've got the next chapter, and
Have you got anything for us?
Yeah. Can you? Am I not being heard? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Carl, can you hear me?
I can't hear anything.
Huh.
What about you, Brett? Or do you hear him? I hear him fine.
I can hear Tarek fine.
I'm not hearing anything.
You're not. Hold on. Let's see here.
How about now?
We can.
Can you still not hear me, Carl?
Carl? Oh, Carl is dead.
I get. Can you still not hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. There it goes.
Oh, okay. I was saying
No,
a whole
I'm
bunch
listening
of shit.
on the.
Okay.
Oh, I can hear you now. There it goes.
Oh, okay.
But now we're getting the echo.
What's the weird echo? Yeah.
It's from Carl.
Oh
listening.
no, wait! I'm looking on the I'm following along on YouTube. That's how I'm hearing people. I'm not hearing anything from the.
What's the weird echo? Yeah.
It's from Carl.
Oh no, wait! I'm looking on the I'm following along.
Maybe you can put some headphones in or something.
Not hearing anything from the.
Okay.
Oh man.
Shit.
Yeah. I hate technology. Die, technology, die!
All right. So should I just start reading?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Carl, you may want to mute. All right.
Oh,
Okay. So last time we left off, Aviana was taken by Silas to the training hall where she is going to learn basic combat and how to defend herself. When we left off, she attempted to kick Silas in the shins, and she was ready to be basically, reprimanded for it, but he was impressed with her, saying, like, I wasn't expecting you to fight dirty. Maybe you have what it takes after all. Because in their line of work, there is no honor, there is no dignity in battle. Battle is only to survive. They mostly get what they need done through stealth, but they must be willing to do whatever it takes to win the fight. That being said, today that leads us to where we are today, where we see that's where we are today. Then that's where we left off, and now to start today's. Oh wait, hold on, stupid thing. For some reason, it's at the wrong page. Okay, here we go. Aviana panted heavily, wiping sweat from her brow as her damp clothes and hair clung to her body. The hours of training were beginning to take their toll. Not even her bandages were spared as the damp, smelly cloth threatened to fall off her body. She felt so fatigued that she almost didn't see Silas's blade swing in her direction. She lifted her sword up to block his blow as her arm shook like a leaf in a fierce gale. She could feel every previous strike Silas had landed from beginning to bruise and throb in pain. Her knees buckled as though they were going to crumble into dust, and her shoulders felt as though they were going to fall off. When the two blades met, instead of the sword falling out of her hands, she herself fell to the floor and landed on her stomach, her sword falling after her. Aviana grunted as she rolled onto her back, panting and keeping her eyes closed as she struggled to breathe. "Let's take a break," Silas said. Aviana opened her eyes just in time to watch Silas take her sword and place it on one of the weapon racks along with his. "Just rest for a while. I'll be back." Aviana didn't have the energy to turn her head and watch Silas leave, but heard the hatch they came from open then close again. Her ears rang as her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath feeling as though it would be her last. It took every ounce of strength she had left to move her arms under her head and use them as a makeshift pillow against the hard arena floor, and then closed her eyes. The soft flickering of the candles and heat of the room had helped lure her into a blissful sleep. As she slept, she could feel her breathing becoming slower and calmer as her aches and pains became a distant memory. As the warm darkness stretched before her, she gave herself to it, if only wishing that it would never end. The next thing Aviana felt was something cold slide down her head and shaking her shoulder. The sensation felt uncomfortable, causing her to reluctantly turn over onto her side as she mumbled something incomprehensible. She then felt something grab her shoulder again and shake it. She grabbed whatever the bothersome object was and tossed it away, attempting to re-enter her blissful oblivion. Suddenly, she heard a loud splash. Her eyes shot open, and she screamed as her body bolted upwards. The entire upper half of her body was wet and felt freezing as her muscles began to feel tight, so much so that she couldn't hug herself for warmth. She slowly turned her head, teeth chattering, and saw Silas standing over her with an empty bucket in his hands. What in the abyss was that for?" she cried out in between chattering teeth. "I tried waking you up gently, but you wouldn't respond, so I had to try something else," Silas said without concern as he put the bucket on the floor. He walked over to a dry part of the arena and sat next to two wooden cups along with what appeared to be a burlap bag. "Well, get over here. You're going to need some food if we're going to continue." Aviana slowly scooted over towards him, her body still shaking and shivering. Silas pulled out a loaf of bread out of the sack and broke it in half, extending his left hand towards her. She cautiously reached her trembling arm out and took the other half of the bread and took a bite of it. The bread was fresh. The bread was warm, fresh even, with the outside crisp and the interior moist and flavorful, almost sweet. As she swallowed her first bite, she realized just how hungry she was. She began taking as many large bites as her mouth would allow, and a moment later, the bread was devoured, leaving nothing but crumbs on the floor. If you're going to be my apprentice, you can't eat like that. You're a civet, not a wild beast. It's both undignified and repulsive to see. Silas scolded her, while giving a disapproving look. Even worse, when you eat like that, you risk leaving behind evidence of your trespassing, he said, gesturing to the bread crumbs that had been scattered along the floor. Aviana sighed and watched as Silas slowly chewed his bread, occasionally taking a drink of water. Suddenly, Silas reached into the sack again and threw something that landed in her lap. When she picked up the object, she discovered it was an apple with red and yellow skin. You seem to really enjoy the one you were eating this morning. I thought that you might enjoy another, Silas said as he took out some cheese and pulled off a piece, slowly eating it. Aviana licked her lips and was about to take another large bite of the fruit when she looked over at Silas and saw him frowning. She stopped herself and straightened her back, then put the apple to her mouth, taking a much smaller bite than she normally would. Unlike the apple she had earlier, this one didn't bleed as much juice when she bit into it, and felt slightly drier. The flavor was also different. Instead of being purely sweet, there was a hint of tartness to it, yet she enjoyed the treat all the same. The two sat in silence, the only sounds coming from the cracking and flickering of flames and the soft eating of food. As she ate, Aviana's body continued to shiver and shake, even with heat coming from all the candles. When she finished, she got up and walked over to the large collection of candles, sitting on one of the railings. As she stood close to the flames, she could feel the heat loosening her muscles and limbs. At some point, you're going to need to learn to swim in those kind of waters, Silas said from behind. Swim in it? She questioned, doing nothing to suppress her shock at the idea. I can't even imagine touching it. I'd freeze to death. Well, you're going to have to learn. You do know how to swim, right? Hold on one moment. I apologize. Sorry about that. Well, you're going to have to learn. You do know how to swim, right? Yes. I learned how to swim a long time ago, Aviana responded, looking into the flame of the candles. This question had sprung a memory she hadn't thought about in a long time. In the summer, during the hottest months when they weren't working on the fields, Matron Alessa would take her and the other children to Lake Sidonis just outside the city. She could still see it as though she had been there yesterday. The lush green grass, tall, shady trees that she would occasionally nap under, along with various wildflowers growing in the fields surrounding the lake. It was there Matron Alessa had taught her how to swim in the lake's cool waters that would sparkle in the sunlight. Aviana found the skill to be particularly useful on numerous occasions when the other children would push her into the river. Merrick would follow after her just to make sure she was okay, but the others would usually leave after she fell in, often laughing. Suddenly, her body grew tense as the flames from the candles began to flicker and found herself unable to look away. The flames began to look brighter and harsher, and suddenly she began to hear screams, specifically the horrified screams of the other children from the orphanage. She shook her head rapidly, attempting to silence their cries, her breathing becoming quick and heavy. Are you all right? Silas said, placing his hand on her shoulder. Suddenly, the screams died, and she was left in silence. I'll be fine, Aviana replied as she wiped stray tears from her eyes using the bandages on her wounded hand. Silas silently looked down at her and gently took her bandaged hand and frowned. Before we continue, we should change these bandages, Silas said, leading her back to the sack and pulling out a new spool of wool bandages. Aviana yelped as Silas unwrapped the bandage on her hand and leg and arm, whimpering as she felt the warm air brush against her wounds. He then quickly and quietly began to wrap the new bandages around them. Thank you, Aviana said with a small smile. You cannot train effectively if your wounds aren't tended to, Silas said as he tightened the last bandage around her hand. That tight enough? Aviana flexed her hand slightly, wincing as she could feel her cut threaten to open again. Yes, sir. Thank you. Good. Now go grab your sword and we'll continue. Aviana felt the impact of her body hitting the floor before Silas's strike on her leg. As she collected herself, she dropped her sword again and began rubbing her shin, grunting in pain. Do you know how vulnerable you are right now? Silas asked. Very, Aviana replied meekly. Indeed. In battle, you cannot afford to let pain distract you. You must remain strong till your last breath. Also, stop aiming for my weapon. Every strike must be made with the intent to incapacitate or kill your opponent. Every wasted strike gives your opponent the opportunity to strike you back. All this time, I've been leaving obvious openings that even a complete novice could spot. Silas said, staring down at her. Aviana let go of her leg as she panted, looking down at the floor. After the small break, they continued practicing for what felt like hours. There was now no part of her body that wasn't in sore or in some kind of pain. Though her shirt had dried, it had become soaked in sweat again, as were her pants and new bandages. The Chancellor told me every dead person is a lost source of information, Aviana replied tiredly, as she picked herself off the floor only to fall back down. That is correct. We are not murderers or killers. That is why our methods rely on subtlety. Our goal is to obtain information without anyone knowing we were there, Silas explained, sounding prideful. Then why do I have to aim to kill if I'm just going to sneak past them anyways? Aviana asked. Many things can go wrong during an assignment, even for a master raven. You may overlook an important detail. Patrol schedules could change, and sometimes fate just acts against you. If a guardian or a mercenary catches you skulking around somewhere important, like let's say the inside of the palace or the mage's college, they will stop at nothing to find you. Wouldn't it just be easier to eliminate them? Aviana said as an uncomfortable chill gripped at her soul as she contemplated the thought. Murder is only to be used as a last resort if there is truly no other option, Silas said, his voice becoming stern. Every murder you commit becomes a liability, and you risk our exposure. I understand, sir. I don't want to hurt anyone, but what happens if I'm caught? What will happen to me? Aviana felt her body shake as she asked the question, somewhat wishing she hadn't. The most likely scenario, they'll interrogate you. If you resist, they will beat you within an inch of your life, and then call a mage to either heal your broken body so they can do it again, or they'll just have the mage continue your interrogation in other ways. Once they get all the information they can get out of you, they will most likely kill you, especially if they learn you are a Civet, Silas said, sounding slightly forlorn. Aviana gulped. She had heard stories about what happened to prisoners, mostly from drunken guardians with loose lips, tales of amputating fingers, setting men ablaze, flaying their skin clean off, and all other manners of horror she did not wish to recollect. What if they capture me? Will anyone try to rescue me? Aviana asked, finally looking up at Silas. Silas looked down, his eyes turning serious as he began speaking in a firm and unflinching voice. I will not lie. You, more so than any of our agents, are expendable. The primary reason I vouched for your recruitment and gave you this opportunity to join us is for that reason. If you are caught and tell the Guardians about us, we will disavow you. We will act like we never met, and it will be a Civet's words against ours. Silas went silent for a moment, and then continued narrowing his eyes. He looked down at her, sending a chill down Aviana's spine. I will only say this once. If you are caught and speak of us, then by some miracle of Tyrion manage to survive, I will kill you myself. I will not allow my actions to threaten this organization. Do I make myself clear? He asked, staring down at her. Aviana's mouth trembled, yet no words came from her lips as she went rigid and processed the threat. She had noticed that Silas was leaning forward like a predator about to attack if she gave an unsatisfactory answer. It was as though she was staring into her own demise. I understand, sir. I won't tell anyone, I swear. She replied, as her words stumbling and falling out of her mouth as she attempted to hold back her cries of fears. Good. Now get up. We're done for the day. Sorry, that was wrong. Good. Now get up. We're done for the day. Silas replied as he walked away from her and picked up her sword from the ground. Aviana nervously placed her arms on the ground as she attempted to lift herself up, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move. Her body felt heavy and refused to obey. As she tried to lift herself up again, she fell onto her back, her body going stiff and refusing to move. "What's the matter?" Silas asked as he placed their swords back on the rack. I can't move, she replied with a whimper, and was horrified at what his next words would be. "Not entirely unexpected. You're not used to this kind of regiment like our other recruits. Your body is not accustomed to the strains and rigors of training. Not to mention you are very underfed for your age," Silas replied calmly, to her surprise. Eviana heard him walk away before, and then a splash before Silas came close again. Suddenly, he grabbed her hand and lifted her up until she was sitting up straight. She then felt him place a cup against her lips. You are also more than likely dehydrated," he said calmly. Eviana opened her mouth and felt the cool water slide down her throat as she grabbed the cup in her hands. It was only then she realized how dry her mouth felt. She could feel the cool water breathing back life back into her throat and lips as she tilted the cup further down, drinking faster. In her haste, she felt the water tickle the back of her throat, causing her to choke. She violently jerked and coughed, spraying water out of her mouth onto her clothes and floor as she tried to find her breath. "How many times do I have to tell you? Slow down!" Silas asked as he got up, and she continued to cough up water. I'm sorry. I was just so thirsty," she replied, coughing. She watched as Silas dip the cup into the bucket again and bring it to her. She had just enough energy to raise her right hand and take the cup from him, and then slowly began to drink from it. Once the cup was empty, her body went limp, and she fell back onto the floor. "You are in no condition to move, and I'm not going to carry you out of here. You're going to have to stay here for the night," Silas said calmly. Eviana didn't have the energy or willpower to argue, as at that moment the hall's stone floor felt more comfortable than any bed she had ever slept on. The heat from the candles kept the floor warm and felt oddly comforting, like air on a warm summer's day. She relaxed her body, allowing it to go limp, only slightly turning her head just enough to watch Silas starting to walk away. It took all of her effort to roll onto her stomach and get comfortable, her vision going blurry as she yawned again. She had just enough strength to see what Silas was doing, to see Silas doing something to one of the unlit braziers near her. Before she could see what he was doing, her exhaustion went out and her eyes closed as she began to drift to sleep. And that's it for this week.
I like it. It is very interesting. Yeah, I like the father-daughter relationship. I also like the setting up of like how expendable this poor young girl is.
That's actually my favorite part. The fact that it is quite he tells her he's not pulling his punches. He's not telling her, like, "Oh, we'll come after you." No, we picked you up off the street because you are expendable.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way, because he's not unkind to her. He's kind to her, but he's also like very severe and just tells her the way it is. So he's kind of an interesting kind of almost kind of grayish kind of character. Is interesting.
Yeah. So she's basically cannon fodder.
In a way, she is kind of cannon fodder. It's just more like, hey, this will be explained later, but it's more like, hey, our recruitment numbers are low, but we need to kind of pull from this particular pool. But this person is, kind of useless to everyone else. So, yeah, we have something we can kind of just throw at last minute, if you get what I mean. Or we have someone we can just use.
I did kind of think, when he said, "We'll disavow," pardon me, when he said, "We'll disavow all knowledge of you," I was kind of horribly reminded of Mission Impossible. Like, the State Department will deny all knowledge. Good luck, Jim.
Well, I mean, when your leader is literally the chancellor of the city, basically, literally the mayor, you kind of have to. It's kind of like, we don't know who she is. We don't know what she's doing.
Oh, I'm not criticizing. I was just amusing for half a moment there. I got kind of amused because I was thinking, Mission Impossible.
Admittedly, though, the last 3 Mission Impossible movies have been best in the series, which is kind of
Well,
funny.
I don't know the films at all. I'm just going back to the television show. But what else was there? Let's see. And I thought the word choices were all pretty good too. This one, things like that. And like the bit where she says, "Very." Do you have any idea how blah blah and very? So,
Do you know how vulnerable you are? I'm gonna guess fairy since you're asking.
yeah, that bit that amused me.
Well, it's such a child's answer, though. Like I'm going to assume it's not a good. It's not. This isn't good.
Yeah. I mean, she's very childlike too. So, and your voice for her is good too. I probably mentioned that before.
I one of my other favorite parts though is like I actually when I was writing this, I was talking to people about working out. Like if you haven't worked out in a while, you know, what is the ramifications after you're done? And I tried asking a Mahler server, and I was like, "What the fuck am I doing? These people don't know what a gym is."
And what did they say?
Exactly what I said. What the hell is a gym? But then I remembered when I was in college, I had to do a fitness class, and I had to do a fitness class. And the first day after I did the first workout, my arms were locked. I could not move them. And now I'm thinking, well, what she's doing is a full body thing, so she wouldn't be able to move. Period.
Yeah, I was kind of raw at PE as well. So what can I say?
I did ROTC for a semester, and the Army does not mess around.
No, they do not.
Well,
yeah. Speaking of somebody who had to go through like their PE classes for a while, for several months.
Well, even normal PE, I was never good at. I just couldn't get into it.
Mm. Any other comments or concerns or anything?
It's stat. Just kidding.
All right.
Yeah.
You knew that though.
I think it works well. I'm interested to see the progression. So this is actually I'm doing something from I'm actually going back to one of kind of my new books. I read this for a while, but I'm gonna be reading a little bit more of it today, kind of to try to convince the four or so people in the chat to buy it.
Is this the Hera and Narcissus one?
Yep, this is the Hera and Narcissus one. Yep.
And this one is not, because one of your books was supposedly you made it for Trump supporters or something. So I'm assuming this book is for anyone, whether they're Trump supporters or not.
Maybe not Trump supporters, but at least like people who loathe Disney Star Wars and really like Conan the Barbarian. Like,
well,
really like
probably lots of people loathe Disney Star Wars, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe like modern, like liberal filmmaking and storytelling, I guess, is the better way of putting it.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, no Trump supporter. So I shan't be buying any of your books if they're all just for Trump supporters. I shan't be buying it. Also, I shan't be buying books that are. I don't generally buy books that are specifically designed for political. Pardon me, I'm talking for political like thesis of some kind, whether it's anti-SJW or whatever. So I'm not going to read any of those things.
Oh, you're going to hate this one. You're going to hate my book.
Well, yours is about communism. It's different. It's not like it's not. Pardon me. Stop interrupting me, please. Do you mind not letting me talk now and then? That's so annoying. You keep doing that. You're setting a very bad example for your other guests too. I've complained about this several times.
Yes.
Where was I anyway? What was I saying last time? Because you distracted me, so I forgot what I was saying.
I believe it was about like communism.
Oh yeah, he said communism. Well, that's on a higher level. It's not just identity politics stuff. So.
So Balerion, I was making a joke about Trump supporters. It wasn't actually true. I don't like Trump either. I don't like Trump either.
Like, because you were saying, oh, I'll get this published because I live in Utah and it's red and it's got this guy who's a good person, therefore Trump supporters will like it. I'm like, what are you even talking about?
Well, there's a guy who's a manly man who very much is a refutation of the femboy trend that is unfortunately the case in most media these days.
Yeah, well, I probably wouldn't like either of those choices.
Yeah. Or at least like he's, well, I read a little bit. He's the bear skinner guy.
Yeah, that chap. Okay. Yeah.
What the hell are you talking about? All I heard was like femboy archetype, and I'm going, done. What the hell are you talking about?
Have you seen modern media? Most of that. It seems like the manly man barbarian archetype from the pulps is dead.
Oh no, it's a dead trope. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm just like, let's bring it back.
Well, yeah, either one, whatever. I mean, I wouldn't care for either for the jock or the femboy, probably.
Well, at least this jock. Well, he has to suffer in order to get his jockness, to get his chadness.
I'm not gonna lie. Hearing Balerion say femboy just puts a shiver up my spine. It just sounds so wrong.
Yeah, it is kind of wrong, but at least it's obvious what it meant. It was obvious what it meant. It's not like blowed or gnignag or whatever other bizarre words people are using these days. At least it wasn't chad or showed or whatever, tis or bliblab or blunk or glap.
This has just evolved.
No, they're doing like different Greek letter males. Like they had alpha male, beta male, omega male. So then they started doing, they extended to like the gamma male, the lambda male,
sigma,
delta male, the sigma male. I'm thinking, what is this? Is this like a new coronavirus variant or something?
You don't want to be an omega male. You do not want to be an omega male.
Very, very sigma mindset you have, Carl.
It was a tasteless joke, Balerion.
It's not your worst joke. I just had so much politics shoved in my throat around here that I just got tired of it.
No worries. Well, it's kind of just like I guess like people that like Conan the Barbarian is the idea of the people who will like the
I probably don't like Conan the Barbarian. The art is really rubbish.
Well, yeah, it's kind of just the idea of it follows a very fairly strict formula. It's this barbarian dude goes off on various adventures. You can pick up pretty much anything. Any of the adventures. There's his past, there's his there's the middle, then there's there's his time as king. But pretty much he's very episodic.
And then he beats people a lot.
Yeah, there's ruins for him to discover, a beautiful woman to rescue, and a monster to fight.
I'm sure there's plenty of that going on, but needless to say, you probably dumps them the next day though.
Oh, well, depends. Well, it depends. Some of them he doesn't get with, by all accounts. I haven't read any. Okay, so this one, I'm actually going to be kind of setting up I'm actually going to be going through most of the battle of the Seven Sons for a little bit for the next few readers, just to kind of read the battle and get people interested. But I first have to read the setup.
Okay, one quick thing. Brightness Becca in the chat. Really getting all the meat off this tangent, guys. LOL.
Yeah, I should.
Pretty much. Much.
Yeah, we are so off topic.
Yeah, it gets ugly. It's my fault, kind of too. But I need to go on a bit of a mild rant.
Fault.
No, you're
every
fine.
now and then I need to rant,
Oh, everybody needs that. It's not just you, my friend.
Yeah, but I'm a past master at it.
Yeah, and I just kind of it's fine. Let's but at least like he's got some measure of intelligence. He's not just a dumb jock. I think that would be really boring. He at least like studies for 3 years at the biggest library in the world. Just
Oh, he
because
can read and write?
Yes, he can read and write. Yeah. Well,
Femboy.
Nerd.
Sigma male.
For 4 years he's in campaign after campaign getting rich, and then he realizes I don't want to be out here for. I want to at least get some information and get like some measure of education. So he decides to find a library and learn to read and write, and especially since he doesn't want to be around other people because he smells terrible because he hasn't bathed in 4 years. Bathed or shaved in 4 years.
He must look charming in the library then. He must really fit the decor.
He
Probably looks like me in the library.
Yeah, it's kind of taking since I really like the Bear Skinner story. I think that's great. I'll start. The chirping of the cicadas outside the villa's windows made Carlion's eyes drifted open. For a moment he closed his eyes, then turned back to Ajania, circling behind him on the bed. They'd had their own little party, just the three of them, food, wine, and intimate relations. Sighing, Carlion placed his hand around and stroked the other man's side. He admitted it would have been nice to keep the pretty young man around, and Ajania was more than happy to have two handsome men, one with tan dark hair and the other one pale and silver-haired in her bed, but there wasn't much he could do to bring the young man with him. Carlion, wake up. He turned around to see a short young girl with flowing silver and black hair floating above the ground, an ethereal blue aura around her. What the? Carlion reached over and grabbed Dark Fate, the black sword pointing at the intruder's chest. Who are you? At the corner of his eye, Carlion noticed Ajani and Sarklins were still asleep, almost as if they were frozen in time. The girl ignored the two others on the bed and kept her attention focused on Carlion. Your sister is in danger, Carlion, she said quietly. She is being led into a trap. You must take Meles and as many men as you can gather by tomorrow in order to reach her in time. Go to the north as fast as you can. I will guide you. Be swift. The fate of your family hangs in the balance. Without a word, she vanished in a puff of blue mist. Mind racing, Carlion took a deep breath, then started trying to piece through what he had seen. Could it be? Lilith was supposed to have died almost 1,000 years ago. Oh, at the hands of Megar, God's bane. Could the stories be falsehoods? Abruptly, Ajania awoke, eyes blurry with sleep. Cayuba? She said, dazedly using her pet name for him. What is going on here? It's so cold in here. A vision of something. Carlion trailed off, then took a deep breath and pulled on his clothes. I need to go speak with my father. Hera's in danger. I need to help her. Abruptly, Carlion's eyes fell on the hawk perched on the stand near the window. Blinking away what little drowsiness remained to him, Carlion ran to the stand and wrote a letter to his father. The hawk accepted him, putting the message around his neck. For a moment, Carlion let his breath still, then he lashed onto the hawk in the same way as he would with Meles. Without any resistance, the hawk immediately came under his control. Briefly, Carlion took time to test the creature's reflexes before spurring her into the sky. The flight through the city was fast, but as soon as he reached the main palace, he found his father awake and dressed already. Carlion, Cronin said as soon as the hawk landed. What is it? The older man quickly untied the letter and read it over. So you dreamed of her as well, Cronin whispered as he read the letter. It must be a sign, then. I will make the necessary preparations for moving out. Blinking in amazement, Carlion pulled the hawk back to him, then took a deep breath. Something beyond his understanding was happening in here. But he knew one thing. If his father and him had seen the same vision, then there must be some truth to it. He had to leave quickly, or Hera could die. Hera grimaced, but she held her annoyance in as she rode into the abandoned wall of the city that she and her army had set up camp inside to hide from the sudden torrential storm. Travel had begun to slow drastically with the sudden downpour that lasted for 3 straight days. Though now they were in the city, they were able to bunk in the abandoned houses. I'm starting to think that Darien the Peacemaker and Ilgamith made a mistake in stripping the Athara cities of their walls. Hera grimaced as she made her way into the main city hall, accompanied by Urgast. Toresh and the other captains were already there, a large meal from the provisions laid out before them on a table. Water dripping from her clothes, she placed the wet garment on a drying rod before taking a seat at the table. Best set up archers inside the houses. No one is to bunk in the bottom floors. As you say, Toresh nodded. As many orc crossbowmen and archers as possible, with pikes in the middle floors preventing them from getting swarmed. Good, Hera nodded. Until the storm abates, we stay here, but as soon as it clears, we must be ready to march. This flaming fine weather can only favor us, Borihar remarked as he took a bite out of the venison they laid out on the table. The commander of the human division was a tall, broad man with bright red hair and a square face. Morale is good, despite the blasted weather. The men all know that rain is a bloody excellent barrier against sodding mamics. Toresh nodded, then grimaced. Indeed, but our enemy has the advantage in terms of they know that we only have a few spots where we can engage them. He raised his hand to forestall the human general. However, for now, our position is secure. Hera allowed her soldiers to discuss matters, casually cataloging as many details as she could. She had a great deal to think about, but the battle was in flux at the moment. Considering the fact that the rain was going to make all of the land extremely muddy, making the footing for their horses and infantry unstable. For a time being, the defenseless city would be their camp, but Hera did not particularly like being corralled in here. Narcissus sat in his chair, listening and taking notes, but he didn't say anything. Good thing he hasn't brought up that ludicrous tunnel theory recently, she thought dryly, taking out her medallion and setting it down on the table. Idly, she ran her hand along the edge of the round piece of metal as the discussion continued. He had tried to get people in Alyssus to volunteer for his investigation, but they'd all laughed in his face before leaving. If only the bloody rebels would show their damn faces, Borihar blustered, slamming his fist into the table. We've been moving around at a damn snail's pace in order to prod the bastards into meeting us on the field. They know that there's one place that suits them, Hera said calmly, drawing her sword and placing the tip against the map, right atop off a plain called Autalon. This is the best spot for them to deploy everything they have at us. But the thing is, I have a plan for when we reach it. Narcissus leaned forward, eyes shining with interest, but the other generals just looked expectant. She'd handpicked each of them due to several years of working with them. They were familiar with how she worked. Casually, Hera shifted her sword and put it to the side so that she could start moving around the markers. We have no idea what our enemy's numbers are, but it's best to plan as though they have higher numbers for the time being. She set the cavalry markers first, then the infantry. If it turns out that we have larger numbers, we will adjust accordingly, but for now, here is my plan. Hera stood up and began using the guiding stick to indicate where she wanted her troops deployed. I want all the cavalry deployed on the wings, orcs on one side, humans on the other. The center will have an overlapping mixture of orc pikemen, human swordsmen, and archers of all three races. I want the pikes in front and the swords and axemen in reserve for when the enemy closes with us, but I mean for them to be weakened before we close with them. For emphasis, she placed her fingertips on the corner of the map. Once they do close with us, we need to bow the line backward and hit them up from all sides, negate their numbers as much as possible, then turn the ground into a killing field. She circled the area that she indicated. Sitharis has been torn by war for too long, so now that we're at this point, we need to decide how to utterly prevent war in the future. She glanced around, eyes surveying each of her compatriots. What do you mean? Toresh asked, leaning forward. Hera adjusted her gloves slightly before continuing. 3 times Sitharis has rebelled against us, she began, holding up 3 fingers so she could tick them off. Each time a different approach was taken to restore peace. Displays of mock prowess haven't worked. Megara broke their armies on the burning grounds, but only a few generations later, the Dissenter was able to rile them up so that he could incite the first dragon strife. Eric was able to destroy the enemy armies while building good relations in the country due to his diplomacy skills. However, that only lasted until the War of the White Hand, when they took advantage of the dragons fighting in order to throw the orcs at the orcs and Parthians. Darian the Peacemaker was able to somewhat fix this by putting Ilgamith in control, though they hated having a Parthian above them. Even removing their ability to defend themselves with walls hasn't worked. She clasped her hands behind her back and surveyed the room. We must ensure that rebellion never happens again. We must leave a lasting remembrance of what dragons do to their enemies. To do that would require such a display of either brutality as to provoke action from the other kingdoms, Toresh remarked. I know, but we must ensure peace at any cost. She picked up one of the pieces representing the Sitharis rebels, a jade elephant. Why do you believe, Eve, they have such an indomitable spirit? Bloody obstinacy, Borihar suggested. Their gods, Toresh remarked. Not satisfied with their answers, Hera held up the elephant for emphasis. It is the unity of their people, their ability to come together even after great destruction, that has granted them such longevity. She set it down on the table, keeping her hands on the object. It is the people that we must break. Not their leaders, those will be replaced. Not their cities, they'll rebuild them, even if we reduce them to rubble. Casually, she flicked the jade elephant over with her finger, the piece thudding gently against the map. Once those obstacles are eliminated, there remains only one task. So, we break the people. But how do we do that? Torash asked. Good, he's inviting clarification. Hera smiled, then raised her hand, fingers slack. A brutal massacre would serve no purpose, especially after we beat them in combat. However, there is one option that has not yet been tried. She closed her fist for emphasis. We scatter them to the four winds, turn them out of their forests, and bring in more colonists to occupy what they have left behind. Once we have fully disinherited them and removed any possibility of further uprising, we will know that they cannot do anything to trouble the Empire further. Slowly, she looked around the table for the others' assent. Slowly, they nodded in agreement. All save Narcissa, who seemed rather disturbed by this turn of events. Teresh nodded slightly, baring his fangs in agreement. Impassively, Borihar started tapping his fingers against the table. It is a dark and dangerous road we are taking, Hera thought as she surveyed the impassive faces of her fellow commanders. But if we do not do this, we will never have peace. And who's to say that if we do have peace, Eason pulled out, we would never be able to stop worrying about the raids. We would begin to lose our face with the other kingdoms in the south. This is a pivotal moment, one that will reverberate through the annals of history for all time. Narcissus felt somewhat uncomfortable as he left the council room into the rain outside. Grimacing, he pulled at the hood of his cloak, carefully thinking through what had just been said. Hers sounded like she really meant what she said about breaking the Sitharis people, but maybe she didn't mean it. She made really good points about why peace needs to be restored at any cost, but I thought this was all about becoming better people. It didn't make sense to him. Everything about what she had said about becoming better floated in his mind, about not being so arrogant, working with the men, doing things that would improve him as a person. How are you doing? She turned to see Hera walking up beside him, her orc bodyguard walking beside her. A peal of thunder blocked out most of what she said, but he had a vague idea. What? Narcissus asked, just to be certain. I just asked how you were doing, Hera remarked, putting her hand on his shoulder. You seem like you're a bit on edge. Yeah, a little, Narcissus said honestly. I'm just trying to sort out some things in my head. Such as? Hera asked, tilting her head. She was so beautiful, but she was strong as well, and smarter than he was. He would have never come up with any of the strategies that Hera seemed to easily come up with. She probably did a lot of planning when he wasn't around, but it seemed like she was able to just rattle it off like it was nothing. Like how you come up with such excellent strategies, Narcissus said, keeping his actual concerns for later. Surprisingly, Hera laughed. You do realize that most strategies are terrible when you first come up with them, and they require a significant amount of working out the finer details in private with people like Torash and other strategists, right? She asked. Not mocking, just general correction. He liked that side of her more than when he'd been behaving like an ass. Ah, he nodded in understanding. There was something else, he trailed off, unable to think of a way to put it into words. You're concerned about the end goal of this. Hera tilted her head in motion for him to talk. Please, tell me what's on your mind. Unsurprised that she'd read him so easily, Narcissus carefully considered what he wanted to say. It took a while to find the right words, but thankfully she was patient. It was harder since the whole time Urgast was giving him a contemptuous look the whole time. I don't know how I feel about what you're planning on doing to the people here, he said carefully. It seems extreme. Shouldn't we be trying to do what you've been telling me to do in terms of winning hearts and minds? Hera nodded slowly, clearly approving, though of what he couldn't tell. You've definitely learning to think more critically than you were, but I don't think you've thought about what I'm trying to do with you. She pulled out a medallion a little bit bigger than a crown and turned it over in her fingers before putting it back. I thought you were trying to do... what you were trying to do was make me into a better man. Narcissus said, keeping his voice as careful as possible. I'm trying to make you a better ruler. Hera casually clasped her hands behind her back. Those are two very different things. That was not the answer he anticipated. How? Narcissus asked, trying to work through what she'd said. I don't quite understand. Hera took a deep breath. It didn't sound frustrated, just patient. When you are a ruler, you must do things you might consider distasteful and immoral in order to maintain your crown and the peace, she explained. A good man doesn't often make a good king for that reason. What I want you to do is think, be smart, understand how to work with people. Why can't we do that with them? Narcissus pointed to the woods. Because we've tried that multiple times at this point, Hera said calmly. Think of it this way. How many lives do we save if we allow Sitharis to rebel against us again? Very few, Narcissus admitted, unable to argue with her logic. So, by breaking a rebellious kingdom, we ensure that our people will live and that our kingdom, which has been mostly stable with a few wars throughout our history, will continue to keep the peace, she said. We must consider the ramifications of our actions far down the line, long after we're dead. Ah, I see. Narcissus nodded. But what will this action do down the line? It will be seen as a move that was difficult, but is definitely unpleasant to consider, she said. It may be a sign of what we do to our enemies, but Sitharis has been rebelling against us since the time of Megara. None of the other kingdoms have done that. We stand as a bulwark against order and rebellion, and oftentimes men's spirits must be crushed in the shoring up. Doesn't mean I have to like it, Narcissus said earnestly. That is the beauty of having people like me, Hera shrugged. Every ruler must have a beast that they can unleash at will on their enemies. That way, there can be someone who will always take the blame or the credit, as the case may be, so that you may maintain the goodwill of your people. Those who matter will know and will see you as strong, while those who don't will see you as a good ruler. Most people don't care about what lies beyond their field. All that matters to them is the prospect of continuing their lives in peace. You give them that to them, they won't care about anything else. Narcissus took a moment to consider this. He hadn't considered what the peasants or nobles thought of this, just what he would think of himself should he do something like this. Maybe he should start considering what people would think and then react off of that via careful thought. You've given me a lot to think about. Hera smiled and put her hand on his shoulder. I'm really impressed with how much you've grown. and I want you to know that I am proud of you." To his surprise, she nods a dismissal to Ergast. "Would you be willing to leave us?" His surprise turned to amazement when Ergast didn't protest. Unable to contain himself, Narcissus stared as the big orc grunted and walked away. Taking a deep breath, Hera motioned him to follow her. "Walk with me for a moment." "We have some things we need to discuss," she sighed, seeming unusually thoughtful. And I'll end it there.
You know, I keep forgetting orcs are the main characters here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? It's always nice to know when someone's appreciated, and there's pride in their actions. Nice feeling.
Yeah. She probably might. Yeah, she's not. She's very pragmatic, and she's thought this through quite a bit, but it's definitely a very immoral decision.
And the logic is actually kind of dubious because unless they wipe out everyone, they're just going to make the survivors even more their enemies, and no one will want to, because everyone will think, okay, if they'll destroy us, we may as well, not even bother. Not to mention, not to be too radical here, but why is having an empire so wonderful anyway? So I don't think our logic is a little bit off. This is a fair bit later, isn't it? That from than the last bit was.
Yeah, this is a fair bit later. Yeah,
because the last bit, she was still berating him, and he was still being. He was still very green, obviously. So it's interesting the way they've grown, and she respects him more. And what else was I going to say? Oh, just that Argast, that name sounded kind of not exactly unfortunate, but I don't want to. No comment. No comment on that name whatsoever. No comment. But anyway, yeah, quite enjoyable though.
Yeah. The logic is definitely dubious, but I'm kind of going with kind of like this is how people who have an empire think. They don't want.
Yeah.
They want to maintain that empire at any cost. They don't really care about the human life.
Yeah, I mean the Romans did stuff, so.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea that I was going with here, was like the idea of what Rome did with Judea after with Masada, and kind of the idea and the sack of Jerusalem.
So this story basically does not have a happy ending.
No, it does not have a happy ending.
No, but it still sounds like a decent story though.
Yeah, it's kind of like I wanted to kind of like do kind of something like what George R. R. Martin does with kind of like taking a look at actual history and kind of transposing some of those events into a fantasy setting, but not very many people have done stuff with the sack of the sack of Jerusalem or stuff like that.
No, maybe people are triggered by it.
Yeah, they got what they deserved.
It might just be that it's such a niche part of history, because a lot of the narrative tends not, especially the narrative tends to jump from the history of the Jews to the history of Christianity.
Yeah.
And there isn't really a whole lot going on back in Jerusalem during the time of the sack of Judea. It's mostly Christianity just splitting off into the whole mystery cults and staying underground until Constantine had that vision.
Yep.
We're one of the guys I talked to. We're in a constant discussion.
There's all these different side streets of history that people, don't really know about. Not necessarily because they're not interested. They just don't. There's just so much history, and no one can point to the interesting stuff.
Yeah, Tarek was saying something.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
It's all right.
I still can't hear him.
Huh. What I was going to say was I'm in another server. A friend of mine keeps saying that Constantine was the Or yeah, Charlemagne was the true king of the Christians, not the Pope.
Well, the Pope wasn't a king at all, so
Well, the speaker for God, if you will. That it was actually Charlemagne. It was never the Pope. I just find that funny.
that could be debatable. But yeah, that could be debated. But I was going to say Judea. Yeah, people have heard of Masada and that, so that comes into it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Honestly, like Masada is one of the most like awfully diabolical battle strategies ever devised by anybody.
Yeah, and brightness Becca. Well, yeah, but I'm subtle about it though. Well, I guess the last one wasn't quite so subtle, but I'm usually subtle about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, relatively subtle. To the extent one can be subtle.
Subtle is not a word I associate with you, Balerion, in any context.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Me? I'm just
Yeah.
but I'm so understated and
Well, you are good, and we love you. But you're not subtle.
And here I was thinking I was just so understated and like so dialed back.
Well, I've never made claim to that spurious honor anyway, so no worries.
Yeah. I debate your definition of subtle, Balerion, says Brightness Belka. I'm not sure it's a debate or more like a I think I'd be routed probably.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we conclude? Anything you noticed?
I thought it was fine. Like overall, like it was a solid chapter.
Nice. I did cut off because basically what's going to happen is Hera's going to be is still a very practical person, and she's thinking about the fact that Narcissus is not married and he doesn't have any heirs, and so she decides to resolve that problem then and there. So I decided to cut it off before that happened. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Heraskara.
Hera's scary. She is kind of scary, yeah. Since she has a it's just kind of the ruthless pragmatism of a Roman centurion deciding, no, we're just going to kill him.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I want to know what making out with her would be like.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting, especially considering I imagine her looking like Emilia Clarke.
Oh, I like her better now.
Yeah, she was the model, including the fact that she's very tiny. Because Emilia Clarke is is about the height of my mom. Like she's like 5'2" or something. She's very small.
Interesting. My main character, Lady Margaret, is also 5'2", coincidentally.
Yeah, and like I just kind of, and I tried. Oh, sorry, I cut you off. I apologize. I did that a little bit. I was just kind of. I did that a lot, and I apologize.
Thank you. All I was saying was, I actually made that up a while ago. That's not something I recently came up with. I just haven't put it. You just haven't seen it in the descriptions yet because I haven't gone back and rewritten it yet. But yeah, I think that's all I was saying. Go carry on now. Sorry.
I was just going to say, including the fact that Emilia Clarke has a little bit of has a cute baby face, along with kind of being really tiny, and that's kind of the idea that I use behind it. I don't know if I would like to, if I could, I would love to. If this could be made into a film, I would love Emilia Clarke to play Hera, but that's probably never going to happen because if I'm lucky, if it gets adapted into a movie, that's probably going to be for another 20 or 30 years at the very earliest.
Well, you could always ask her.
If I had Amelia Clark's phone number, I think that I would be a little bit bigger time than I am.
Well,
the
I
alternate
mean,
universe.
The alternate
The alternate
universe.
universe where we are all rich and famous.
Yeah,
Where's
where I
her-
am. I'll go first. Sorry.
where's her can-do spirit?
You don't. Well, we know that you two are going to have giant children. They're 6'9" or something.
Oh, and they'll be cute 6'9"ers too. That because they'll be 6'9" when they're in kindergarten.
They'll be like my cousins who are like all 6'6", whereas I'm a measly 6 feet.
Fucking manlet.
Yeah, don't care.
Yeah. Oh dear. Well, I'm 5'8", so I'm easily beaten here.
6'2".
I'm humiliated
6'5".
now. Yep, I'm humiliated now.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm never going to recover from this moment.
I am never
Me.
going to financially recover from this.
That's done. Giant people lower.
That sounds like a good thing. Yeah, that sounds like a good thing.
Well, such is life. C'est la vie.
So,
Alrighty. Well,
All right.
I think we will conclude it there. I'm gonna be still periodically releasing Legend of the Seeker live streams, though. Maybe we'll just do Monday will be Remarkable Republican. I'm not sure. But we could do his Joker video or his
Ooh.
what?
I said, ooh, yes.
Have you seen? You gotten seen Joker, right?
I've seen Joker, yeah.
Yeah, Joker's
No.
great.
Yes,
Oh,
it is.
Joker's great.
I haven't seen
Joker's
it.
awesome. Joker's awesome. I love Joker. Maybe we could do a movie Bob and Remarkable Republican double feature.
Nice.
oh, that would be a bit of a whiplash, but I
Yeah.
guess. Hey.
Yeah, you know movie Bob, the guy, the eugenics guy, the guy who said that Game of Thrones is basically an edgy version of Shrek.
Yeah, I remember he was saying some weird stuff about Danny too.
Yeah.
Evil Danny. And
He said so. Yeah, we'll be. I'll release the next couple of Legend of the Seeker commentaries on YouTube, and I'll also be doing Rumble. If you guys want to watch some of our commentaries, I'm going to be periodically uploading them to Rumble because Rumble has no copyright problems like YouTube does. They don't care. They don't care. We're gonna just upload the entire commentary up there so you can see it.
and it's quite fun, so you might have a riot with that. We did.
Yeah, we get to hear about Remarkable Republican talking about how Joker is the greatest conservative masterpiece since Aquaman.
So is Joker Trump or is Batman Trump?
No, it's more like he views it as the Joker as anti-bisexual, anti-liberal propaganda.
I can't wait.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, I'm so excited, and I
Well-
just can't hide it.
I haven't seen that film, so maybe it is an attack on it is an attack on bisexuality.
Well, it's not. The evidence that he uses to justify it is so flimsy. It's not even funny. No.
Well, I will judge that.
Oh, no killing my lad though. Against the rules.
Well, he can't be killed anyway.
Tark is invulnerable. He's a bard. Bards always live. It's a rule or something.
And he can beat you, and he can beat us all up anyway.
Yeah, probably.
I work out. I can.
Well, I work out too. I just don't. I haven't worked out in a couple. I think 2 or 3 weeks, and before that, I was kind of like working out like I think like 2 or 3 times a week. I think around give or take. And it's probably weak sauce compared to a lot of gym rats.
Well, I take walks.
I do. I take walks too, so we're in the same boat.
I bike to work 5 days a week.
Shit.
I lift boulders with my pinky
Perhaps.
on a bad day.
I would say Joker is very good.
I agree.
It is definitely not like the Killing Joke or any other thing. I know like people like Professor Geek really just even hate the idea of Joker because of
It's not the same character.
it is not the same character, and also they don't believe that any kind of elemental evil villain should ever get like any kind of backstory, because like it kind of ruins the idea that there is just pure evil in the world.
Despite the fact that Killing Joke is kind of proof that he's not elemental. He's not an elemental evil force. In fact, there's been so many interpretations of this goddamn character, as many as there's been a Batman.
Yeah, he actually hates the fact that there's so many versions. The like true iconic version has kind of been lost in the shuffle. Same with Superman.
What a moron!
Who,
He doesn't deserve. He doesn't deserve an opinion.
Who, remarkable Republican?
Professor Geek. I actually like Professor Geek, but he's kind of biased and kind of thinking that like aspirational heroes are precious, and I just don't share that opinion. I'm actually fine with some measure of aspirational heroes going away to a certain extent, or at least like the best of the week, like kind of aspirational heroes being more like Sanderson characters or Wheel of Time characters, as opposed to just straight paragons of virtue. I honestly think that's really boring.
Yeah. I granted though, at some point I start thinking, can't we just have aspirational heroes? I'm getting so sick of there's always like I'm so sick of the Snyderverse. Can we just get the actual Superman who is an aspirational hero?
Well, you can read the old comics.
Well, kind of the funny thing is, they're not even. That's not even a grimdark hero. That's just a moron.
Who?
Superman.
Superman in the Snyderverse.
Oh, okay. New Superman.
Yeah, new Superman is a moron.
Yeah, he was never very bright.
Well, he's especially bad in Man of Steel because he allows basically millions of people to die in Metropolis and in Smallville.
Maybe that's not stupid. Maybe he's just a jerk.
You do realize you're talking about Superman here, right?
No, I wasn't sure. I thought we were talking about Fred Flintstone.
All right, guys, I gotta get going.
All right, we will call it good there. Adios.
Have a riot.